All right, we almost home. How many animals on the ark? Genesis 6:19, of every living thing of all flesh, two of every sort thou shalt bring into the ark. Genesis 7:8 through 9, of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean, of fowls and of everything that creepeth upon the earth. There went in two and two unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God commanded Noah. Genesis 7:15, and they went into Noah into the ark, two and two of all flesh. We're in this breath of life. Verses Genesis 7:2, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. All right, so by sevens, what is meant here is seven pairs, not necessarily seven animals at a time, but it refers to seven pairs. All right, AskJohnMckay.com. You can see what I'm looking at right here. It's right here. The original question was, how do you explain the contradictions between Genesis 6 and 7 concerning the number of animals that went in aboard the ark? One account therefore states two, one pair of every species without distinction. The other states set 14 pairs of certain favorite species. Yada yada. Okay. If you are taking the Bible literally, this cannot make sense, at least as far as I can see. One version must be wrong. Question then quoted two passages from the RSV version of Genesis 6 and 7. All right. Let's get down. Since this person is quoted from RSV, we will answer from the RSV to be consistent. First point to make is, since we have copies of Genesis dating to the 2nd century BC, it should be obvious that if Genesis 6 and 7 were in contradiction, then you can't be the first to have spotted it. For at least 2,500 years, such as anomalies must have been known, which means you have to give Jews and Christians full credit for integrity and not changing what critics say is a contradiction. This also probably means they have studied it a little more thoroughly and discovered it isn't a contradiction at all. So let's ask, does it seem to be a contradiction only because of the way we in the West read and think? All right, I really don't want to really don't want to take too much time with this. I really don't. But y'all see the site right there. All right, right here. Never thirsty. Noah was to take one pair, a male and female of each kind of animal into the ark, but the clean animals and birds, Noah was to take seven pairs. All right, later in the chapter, Noah's family and all flesh, birds, animals, and breathing things entered into the ark in pairs. All right, so I want to go ahead and give you the shortcut, correct answer. Instead of taking you the scenic route with this, whether seven pairs or one pair it's not a contradiction at all, because the scriptures say over and over that they enter into the ark by twos. All right, so whether it's one pair or whether it's seven pairs, they're still entering into the ark by twos. So it's nothing contradictory about that. All right, moving on. Well, women and men created equal. Should I even entertain this? Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Verses 2, Genesis 2:18 and 23. And Lord God said, it's not good that the man should be alone. I will make him and help me for him. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. All right, this is like what we would call petty, so to speak, but we're gonna get petty in return. All right, this first scripture clearly says it. God created man in his own image. The image of God created he him, male and female created he them. So it's referring to both male and female that were created in the image of God. Now, God is a spirit, as John 4:24 says. So apparently Jesus didn't come on the scene until the New Testament books, starting with the Gospels. All right, so there was no physical, there was no human body for God to come into at this time. So God, as John 4:24 it says, is a spirit. So God is made in the image. God made man in his image. It's talking about spiritually, having intellect, will, things like that, emotion. So it's talking about from a spiritual sense, not in a physical sense. All right, it's not talking about that where this is mentioned, and that just takes a little critical thinking, because the human manifestation of God is Jesus Christ, as Hebrews 1:3 says. Jesus is God in a human body. And that's how it has to be, because with us having sin, being in this body, God cannot show us himself in its fullness. So God decides to come in a human body and portray or show himself to us as a human like us. All right. So were trees created before humans? Do I really want to entertain this? Is this something really worth entertaining? This, I'm not entertaining it, because I mean, now we stoop into all types of lows at this point. I mean, we are. I mean, to me, that's something common sense, that trees were here before man. God created everything and then placed man in a garden. All right. So let's go to something that's actually worth addressing. Did Michal have children? 2 Samuel 6:23. Before Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child until the day of her death. All right. 2 Samuel 21:8. But the king took the 2 sons of Rizpah and the 5 sons of Michal, the daughter of Saul. So let me tell you how petty these people are. And I've said this over and over again, and it's a good thing for me to say over and over again, because people just pull stuff out of a hat and just say, "Oh yeah, let's just put this on it." Okay, let's get pedestrian and elementary. This is the same verse that they put on here. 2 Samuel 21 verse 8. But the king took the 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, whom she bare unto Saul, Armani, and Mephibosheth, and the 5 sons of Michal, the daughter of Saul. Okay, we just gonna read the last part of the verse that they didn't care to put up. Whom she brought up for Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Mahalathite. So these kids were not biologically hers. As the scripture says, whom she brought up for Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Mahalathite. Okay, so these kids, if all you have to do is just read the last part of the verse, and it says she brought up these kids for Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Mahalathite. So these were not biologically her kids. And all you had to do was just read the last part of the verse that they didn't care to put up in this website. Okay, so it's not there. How many stalls does Solomon have? 1 Kings 4:26, and Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Verses 2 Chronicles 9:25, and Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots and 12,000 horsemen. All right. Acts 9:7, and the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice but seeing no man. And they, at verse Acts 22:9, they that were with me indeed saw the light and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. For more detail on this contradiction, for a linguist, a Greek, okay, I'll come back to this one. Let's deal with this. Does Solomon have 40,000 or 4,000 stalls in 1 Kings 4:26? All right. The 2 passages describe different types of stalls. 1 Kings 4:26 says Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. 2 Chronicles 9:25 says Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots and 12,000 horsemen. The 2 verses do not contradict because they describe different types of stalls. For the sake of time, I'm going to stop there. All right, so that's along the lines of just critical thinking and just reading something correctly. All right, like I said, I'm going to come back to this because some of these things are tucked. Some of these things are bolding and some of them aren't. So to catch me off guard, I was only prepared to read the ones that are bolden. Is God omnipotent? Jeremiah 32:27. Behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. Is there anything too hard for me? Matthew 19:26. But Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men this is impossible, with God all things are possible. Versus Judges 1:19. The Lord was with Judah, and he drave out the inhabitants of the mountain, but could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley because they had chariots of iron. Okay, so basically what happened here, when Israel entered into the promised land, there were still other nations in the promised land that they had to drive out. So God left this responsibility unto the Israelites. Okay, it was their responsibility to drive these people out, although God would be with these people. If you keep reading in the book of Judges, the Israelites, these people chose not to drive these people out. Okay, they thought it was easier to put these people to tribute, make them pay taxes, to coexist with these people. It was their decision. They could have very well driven these people out as God told them to, but they chose not to. If you continue to read that chapter, in the next couple chapters, you will find out that Israel chose not to drive them out. Okay, they pretty much gave up and decided to put the people to tribute because it was much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and to further add more credence to my argument. This is Genesis 19, 24 and 25. Okay, this is before the Israelites came about. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and that which grew upon the ground. Okay, so God single-handedly destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah by raining fire and brimstone. So if God could do that, if God can also, now this is with Abraham, the time of Abraham a lot, but in Noah, if he can wipe out the earth with a flood, then certainly he could have driven out one group of people. So this contradiction or supposed contradiction wasn't even well thought out. Does God live in light? Boy. 1 Timothy 6:15-16, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, who only have immortality, dwelleth in the light which no man can approach. The Father of lights. I'm just getting tired. Excuse me. It's a long, exhaustive list. James 1:17, the Father of lights, of whom is no variableness, not shadow of turning. All right, John 12:35, and saith unto them, he that walketh in darkness knoweth not whither he goeth. Okay, verses. I'm gonna skip some of these. He spake to Solomon, the Lord said he would dwell in thick darkness, repeated in 2 Chronicles. Okay. The terms of darkness is contextual. And this is something that some people, well, a lot of people rather, they fail to put things in proper context. And this is just another game of semantics. You take one thing and you try to apply it to every other thing, and you can't do that. So when it's talking about darkness, he that walketh in darkness knoweth not whither he goeth, it's talking about something spiritual. It's talking about walking a wicked or evil path. The wicked or evil path is also known as being in darkness. That's what it's known as. So when you see the term in 1 Kings 8:12, then spake Solomon, the Lord said that he would dwell in thick darkness. It's not talking about the Lord would dwell in thick wickedness. It's not talking about that. But even if we were to sit and say, okay, God dwells in the light, and granted, in a particular context, light is referred to righteousness as well. But let's say, natural light and natural darkness. If we really was going to say it like that and do it that way, then we would have no choice but to go to Jeremiah 23, verse 23 and 24, which says, am I a God at hand, saith the Lord, and not a God afar off? Can any man hide himself in secret places that I shall not see him, saith the Lord? Do not I fill heaven and earth? Okay, so God is omnipresent. So from this particular sense, if God can dwell in light, he can dwell in darkness. So that's just sort of like a little critical thinking right there. Does God accept human sacrifice? Deuteronomy 12:31, thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods, for even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. Genesis 22, verse 2, he said, take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I tell thee of. All right, Exodus 22, verse 29. Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of thy ripe fruits and of thy liquors. The firstborn of thy sons thou shalt give unto me. Exodus 22:29. I'm going to do this real quick. It's talking about in terms of dedication. It's not talking about giving your son as a burnt offering unto the Lord. That's not what it says. The firstborn of thy sons thou shalt give unto me. It's talking about dedicating your children. Even if you read to And Samuel about Hannah, her first son was Samuel, and she dedicated her first child unto God. So it's once again you're dealing with context. Judges 11:30 through 39, and Jephthah, whatever, vowed a vow unto the Lord and said, if thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatsoever cometh forth of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. So J, we're just gonna call him J. J passed over unto the children of Ammon, and the Lord delivered them into his hands. And J came to Mizpeh unto his house, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with timbrels and with dances. And it came to pass at the end of 2 months that she returned unto her father, who did with her according to his vow which he had vowed. Okay, so they skipped some things. Okay. Before I get to the next one, because I think this might be different context right here. All right, so in the book of Judges, all right, God did not tell Jay to offer his daughter. Jay decided to make a foolish vow and, sacrifice his own daughter. God didn't tell him to do that. Okay, and more than anything, it will add more credence to Jesus Christ coming on saying don't vow vows. It will add more credence to that. All right. So that was it with Jay. God didn't tell Jay to do that. So it was a very foolish and silly thing for Jay to even speak of to begin with. But the point we're making is that God didn't tell Jay to do this. So let's go back to Genesis 22, verse 2. He said, take now thy son, thy only son, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Okay, so if you just simply read, just keep reading, you will see that as Abraham lifted his knife to his son Isaac, God sent an angel to forbid him to do this. All right, so God didn't even allow Abraham to sacrifice his own son. So this verse right here is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. God was testing Abraham, and this is one of the other contradictions that they had listed on his website, saying that God tempted Abraham. But God tested Abraham to see if Isaac, this thing that Abraham really wanted, he really wanted an heir. So this was something that was near and dear to Abraham's heart. He wanted a son. Okay, he wanted somebody to continue the lineage of Abraham. All right, so this is something that he really wanted, and God gave him what he really wanted. And God was testing Abraham to see if this thing that he really wanted was an idol to him. Was this something that he was going to now turn his back on God? And I'm going to go ahead and paint the picture in Urban Dictionary style. You know how some people out there, or a lot of people out there, they want something from God, and then as soon as God give it to them, they turn their back on them. Some people, they can get hemmed up with the law. And you know how it is. You get into a situation that you you only going to get out of it through the grace of God. What's that prayer? Because everybody knows this prayer. God, if you get me out of this, I won't do it again. God, if you get me out of this, I serve you. And some people hold true to that. Some people do, but the disparity in the ratio of people that do and don't is very very wide. So once God gets these people out of this mess, they go back to doing what it is that they want to do. All right, or people will only serve God because they're in certain situations. But once they get that job, once they get their husband, their wife, whatever, a lot of people, they gone. They turn it back on God. And God says to Abraham to say, you know what? Or is this what you're going to do with me? Or am I still going to be your God and I bless you with that thing that you wanted so much? So once again, don't take much. Just keep reading. Some of these contradictions, all you got to do is keep reading. And it explains itself. So let's go to 2 Samuel 21, 8 through 14. When the king David took the 2 sons of Rizpah and the 5 sons of Michal, he delivered them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them in the hill before the Lord. And they fell all 7 together and were put to death in the days of harvest. And after that, God was entreated for the land. Okay, so this was not a sacrifice unto God. This was judgment for what these people did. And as a matter of fact, when I go back and get that other one in the book of Acts, I'm going to go ahead and explain this. But these people were judged for the sin that they did. All right, so this is what happened. Hebrews 10 through 12, we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of God. Okay, I mean, this this isn't a contradiction, and to be honest, it puts another feather in God's cap, because God didn't allow Abraham to sacrifice his son, but God came down to sacrifice himself for man. That's what Jesus was supposed to do. Jesus is God, and God sacrificed himself. He wouldn't allow Israel to sacrifice their children, but he came and sacrificed himself. All right, 1 Corinthians 5:7, for even Christ, our Passover, sacrifice for us. No contradiction here. This was the reason why God came down in flesh, is to be a sacrifice for man's atonement, for the things that man did. Not that Jesus did, not that God did, but for what man did. So, of course, that has to stand. Who is Joseph's father? I'm sorry, I said Joseph's. Matthew 1:16, Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus. Verses Luke 3:23, and Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being as was supposed the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli. All right. So, let's see. Chapter was first printed as a non-tract. Okay, I'm not going to read this. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to answer this on my next clip. Who was Joseph's father, along with the judgment carried out in 2 Samuel and the hearing of voices in the book of Acts. I want to touch on 2 Samuel 21 verse 8. All right, so I'm going to go back to my study Bible and read the footnote on here just to give a little more ground on it. Although the Bible does not record Saul's act of vengeance against the Gibeonites, it was apparently a serious crime. Still, why were Saul's sons killed for the murders their fathers committed? In many Near Eastern cultures, including Israel's, an entire family was held guilty for the crime of their father because the family was considered an indissoluble unit. Saul broke the vow that the Israelites made to the Gibeonites, which was in Joshua chapter 9, verse 16 and verse 20. This was a serious offense against God's law. Numbers 30, verse 1 and 2. Either David was following the custom of treating the family as a unit, or Saul's sons were guilty of helping Saul kill the Gibeonites. So the most important thing to take away from that was this was not a sacrifice of people to God. These people were executed due to a violation of a vow that was made unto these people way back in the book of Joshua. So let's move forward. Next is coming from Acts 9:7 and Acts 22 verse 9. Heard or understood in Acts 22 verse 9. Okay, I don't know what that says, but that's Greek, can be translated as heard. And Acts 22 verse 9 will not contradict Acts 9:7. Those who allege a contradiction here need to examine the passages more carefully. Compare. Acts 22 verse 9 says, they heard not the voice of him, the Lord, that spake to me. Acts 9:5-7 says, and he, Saul, said, who art thou, Lord? And the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but saying no man. Acts 22 verse 9 says that the men did not hear the voice of him that spake to Saul. This was the voice of the Lord. The voice in Acts 9:5-7, which the men did hear, was the voice of Saul addressing the Lord, saying, who art thou, Lord? The men heard Saul's voice, which addressed a person, but the men could not see the person who was being addressed. This is why Acts 9:7 says, hearing a voice but saying no man. All right, they heard the voice of Saul saying, who art thou, and what wilt thou have me to do? But nobody saw that he spoke to. But saw nobody that he spoke to, which surprised them, for it is certain they did not hear the voice of Christ that spake to him. Lastly, why does Jesus have two different genealogies? So let's go and get into it. The genealogy in Matthew 1 is clearly that of Joseph, Mary's husband. Matthew records it for legal purposes. He's writing to prove to the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah, and the Jews' custom in keeping records is to trace descent through the Father. Legally, the Jews of Jesus' day looked on Jesus as a son of Joseph. Also, Joseph's lineage is given to emphasize the fact that Jesus had been born of a virgin. Because of a curse that God placed on one of Joseph's ancestors, Jesus could never sit upon the throne of David if Joseph had been his natural father. All right, we're not gonna get into all that. We just want the meat and potatoes. So, unlike Joseph's lineage, there was no block in Mary's genealogy to Jesus sitting on the throne of David. Mary's descent from David comes through his son Nathan, not Solomon or one of David's other children. Luke 3:31. To fulfill his promise to establish David's throne forever, God honored Nathan by making him the ancestor of the promised king who would sit on David's throne throughout eternity. But how could Mary transmit David's royal inheritance, the right to the throne, to her son, since all inheritance had to be passed through the male line? According to Israel's law, when a daughter is the only heir, she can inherit her father's possessions and rights if she marries within her own tribe. Numbers 27, verse 1 through 8, and 36, 6 through 8. There is no record that Mary had any brothers to inherit her father's possessions and rights. Thus, Joseph became Eli's heir by marriage to Mary, inheriting the right to rule on David's throne, even over Judah. This right then passed on to Jesus. So this is not a contradiction as far as Joseph being the son of two different people. It's not a contradiction at all. So that is it. This video is done, or part 1 of this series is done. As I said before, I will continue to make videos as I am led to do so, and once I no longer feel led to do so, I will discontinue making them. But I say that to say, if anyone has any questions on salvation, on baptism by water or spiritual baptism, or what must you do to be saved, or just any questions like that, please drop them below in the comment section. That is why I make videos. I don't necessarily make them to simply apologetic, so to speak, but it's about salvation. It's about restoring people back to Jesus Christ. It's about souls being saved. So if anything that you have in regards to those things, please drop the comments below and I will respond to you. God bless everybody and enjoy your day.